I would like to begin by thanking the Center for Buddhist Studies at SSUS Kaladi for inviting me to take part in this online seminar series. I shall speak briefly today about the invocation of a Buddhist fast in the writings of Dr. P. Palpu, 1863 to 1950, who was at the forefront of campaigns against caste oppression and injustice in Travancore. Having been denied medical education and a job in the government service in Travancore on account of his caste status, Palpu worked for Mysore and Baroda services in a variety of capacities, including health officer, jail superintendent, deputy commissioner of sanitation, and vaccination officer. Palpu is best known for authoring the historical mass petition submitted to the Maharaja of Travancore in 1896, seeking just access to education and employment for the Irava community, and for his pivotal role in the founding of the Srinarayana Dharma Paripalana Yogam. Less widely known are Palpu's unpublished writings and the ideas he develops in them. These comprise a large number of letters he wrote to colonial administrators, the Divan of Travancore, and the leaders of the national movement, such as Gandhi. In these writings, as well as in some of his public speeches, Palpu not only foregrounded the oppressive structures of caste injustice prevalent in Travancore, but also advanced a history of caste differentiation in Kerala. He argued that a just Buddhist society, devoid of caste oppression, existed in the region until the usurpation of power by the Brahmins, who instituted inegalitarian caste structures and stigmatized the communities which resisted Brahmin dominance. His arguments about history have some similarities with attempts in Tamil Nadu, for example by Yodhidasa Pandita, to see Buddhism as an alternative locus for oppressed caste identities. While Palpu's efforts were not so much directed towards the revival of Buddhism, the trope of a glorious Buddhist past served in his discourse as the source of an ethical and social critique. There are four major motives which recur in Palpu's characterization of the Buddhist period in Kerala: prosperity, cosmopolitanism, ethical rectitude, and the absence of Varna and caste stratification. Crucial to Palpu's imagination of this past was the idea of a Buddhist empire which was centered in Kerala and which extended far beyond India. A list of territories which formed the empire is repeated with minor variations in different places by Palpu from 1920s to the late 1940s. In one of his later writings, which he titled Dharma versus Organized Perfidy, the regions that formed the ancient Buddhist empire included Tripishtavam or Tibet, Burma, Siam, Malaya, Cambodia, and the East India Islands, while in the west it included Afghanistan, Iran, Eastern Africa, Ethiopia and other areas in Africa, the West India Islands, and even Guatemala, Yucatan, and Mexico in Central America. Interestingly, Europe and America did not figure in this list. Palpu's map seems to chart an alternative imperium counterposed to the modern colonial cartography of the world. In his speech before the annual meeting of the SNDP Yogam in 1929, Palpu stressed another aspect of the glory of this empire. It was not built up by force, but had come together voluntarily in righteousness, universal love, and service without distinctions of any kind. Nor was the enormous economic prosperity of the empire founded on conquest. The sources were the then world-famous industries of the people here and the worldwide trade they were carrying on at that time. Palpu argues that much of this trade was with the East, but, he says, even the small portion that went to the West was so large that the duty paid by our forefathers here to the ancient Roman government in silks, muslins and calicos from Calicut and other pieces of goods alone imported into that empire exceeded over £1 million in value annually. The beginnings of European trade, which presaged modern empires, were traced back to an ambivalent point of contact with the old empire, where the old and the new cosmopolitan imaginaries met. Palpu suggested that Western nations sent fraternal delegates like Vasco da Gama to Malabar coast on account of their desire to get in direct relationship with the righteous, prosperous and benevolent people here. Palpu made a contrast between the two empires in terms of the principles that governed their trade, with the ancient Buddhist empire serving as the opposite of the exploitative colonial trade. The Buddhist empire of ancient times appears in Palpu's imagination as the opposite of two kinds of domination, the colonial and the Brahminical. Palpu counterposed to modern imperialism not nationalism, but an alternative cosmopolis, a universe of regions connected voluntarily through a shared ethics of trade and religion. In contrast to the valorization of indigenism, Palpu's speculative history stressed territorial expansiveness. This was a local story as well. His imaginary map had Kerala at its center. It was from there that global connections radiated outwards. However, location did not serve to provide a point of historical origin. Kerala and its Buddhism were consequences of migration, taking the account back to trans-regional movements and connections. In 1927, Palpu engaged in protracted correspondence with C.W.E. Cotton, who was then the first agent of the Governor-General for Madras States. When Cotton asked for documentary evidence for Palpu's claim that the Buddhist religion flourished in this coast for 1,500 years, Palpu pointed to the systematic endeavor under Brahminical dominance to suppress this past and distort history, which made it impossible to recover historical documentation. However, the memory of an egalitarian Buddhist past, he suggested, survives to this day in people's memory. Traces of this are found in narrative traditions that go back into the distant past, such as the Puranas. Palpu was not alone in looking for signs of a history of caste in mythological narratives. We find similar attempts in Jyotirao Phule's Gulamgiri and in the writings of Yodidas. Stories around the 10 avatars of Vishnu formed an important element in their critique of caste. The avatara narratives are read by Phule as well as Palpu as concealing the historical event of Brahminical conquest by distortion. They needed to be reconfigured and a true story substituted for the mythical versions. Palpu's accounts of the avatars have some distinctive characteristics. Firstly, they adopt a technique of literalism, which reads mythological powers as the effect of tricks that seek to mislead and create a magical effect on people. For instance, in the story of Vamana and Mahabali, the transformation of Vamana is seen as a trick that brings on temporary elephantiasis. Secondly, a larger geography is invoked in his retelling of the avatars. Bali's exile to the netherworld is understood as his being sent to Batavia, then considered as the antipodes. In the supplementary notes Palpu submitted to Cotton, the story of Mahabali merges into the global extensity of the ancient Buddhist empire. He says, Emperor Mahabali did not feel much for the loss to his empire of his territories here in the mainland at that time, because Ceylon, the East India Islands, and his other dominions such as Burma, Malaya, Siam, Annam, and even portion of China at that time were more or less prosperous and even more exclusive. Towards the west, his empire then included, in addition to the coastal areas, Zanzibar, Tanganyika, and adjoining territories in Egypt, which along with the numerous islands still called the West Indies, and probably also a portion of Central America. This western portion of the empire was being ruled by Mahabali's son named Bana, and that was how the common Malabar names like Nila, Amara, etc. became adopted even in Africa. Palpu's narrative of the Buddhist empire also involved the travel of objects and names from Kerala to other parts of the world. In his letter to Gandhi, he noted, "You know that at the time of Emperor Ashokavarthana, Buddhist missionaries, especially medical missionaries, were sent out from the country to distant lands. The occurrence of Malabar names for drugs like ginger, singiberries from the Malabar name Injivere, in the ancient and faraway Latin, Hebrew, Greek, and other languages is very significant." The second edition of the Oxford English Dictionary considers the traditionally accepted derivation from Sanskrit Shringavere as folk etymology and connects it to the Dravidian predecessor of the Malayalam word Injivere. Palpu did not provide any further evidence to show that the word was carried by Izhava Buddhist medical missionaries. In support of his narrative claim, he cited another set of etymological connections around the word therapeutics. Palpu says, "The key to the mystery will be seen in the word therapeutics, or the science of dealing with the properties of drugs. The word means the science taught by a class of Malabar physicians who had settled themselves in Crete, Egypt, Greece, etc. under the name Thiraputras, that is, sons or followers of Dhira, a special name for Buddha on account of his infinite courage. The Pali equivalent of Thiraputra is Theraputta, and it was from this word that therapeutics, the science taught by the Theraputtas, is derived." Mainstream etymological dictionaries do not confirm Palpu's claim. Walter Scate's dictionary derives therapeutic from Greek therapeutikos, which means tending, and therapeutics an attendant. These words are linked to the root thar, to maintain, support, and notes its similarity to Sanskrit thr, to maintain, bear. Oxford English Dictionary notes that the word therapeutic is also used in connection to Therapeutae, a sect of Jewish mystics residing in Egypt in the 1st century of the Christian era. The Buddhist or Kerala roots do not come up in the mainstream etymological understanding of these words. However, Palpu's etymology taps into existing speculations on a possible connection between Therapeutae and other Jewish mystic sects of around the beginning of the Christian era. Arthur Lilly, in his Influence of Buddhism on Primitive Christianity, published in 1893, noted the similarities between Therapeutae, a group of ascetic healers referred to by Philo of Alexandria, the Buddhists, and the Jewish ascetic sect of Essenes. In another book, he argued that Jesus himself was an Essene. This line of argument appears to have had some influence on Palpu, who used it in his notes and letters. In a memorandum submitted to Cotton in 1927, Palpu wrote, "The Essenes, the Therapeutao, and others then living in the West have also been referred to as Buddhists from here." It was thus that Buddhist ideas and practices are admitted to have influenced the teachings of even Christ, and to have further contributed largely to the form in which Orthodox Christianity shaped itself. Monasteries, nunneries, tonsures, rosaries, confession, celibacy, etc. are all thus admitted to have found their way to Europe from here. Some of the earliest saints of the Christian Church are also believed to have been Buddhists. He developed this argument further in his presidential address at the SNDP Yogam in 1936. He says, "By thus rendering universal love and service without any distinctions of caste, creed, race, language, etc., and by their general character and conduct, our forefathers here had actually made themselves true Christians long before the birth of Christ. The ancient Buddhist empire in Palpu's speculative historical imagination was thus the basis of both his critique of the caste society in Kerala and his demand for restitution. It also served as the ethical ground from which a rejection of the oppressive and unjust sociality of caste is made. Thus, the imaginary of a transoceanic Buddhist empire remains absolutely central to Palpu's social and ethical thinking. Thank you.